From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the professor, Luigi Rosabianca. What's on tap this week, Lou?
Matt, today we're going to test your emotional intelligence. You're one of the smartest guys I know. Not going to lie to you. You're a bright guy. You've got a good social IQ. But today we're going to find out if you've got really strong emotional intelligence. I don't know what that is. So for that, we have Merit Kahn, CEO of SELLect Development. That's not a typo. SELL, SELLect Development. Merit Kahn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start from the basics. What is emotional intelligence?
Well, emotional intelligence is how well you understand your own emotions and the impact that you have on other people. So if you've ever gone into an office or the boss comes into the room and they're kind of in a bad mood, had, fought with the kids in the morning, fought with their spouse, and they just bring all that to the workplace, and everybody who works there thinks, oh my God, are they mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Like, it's really understanding how your emotions, good or bad, kind of get all over everyone. But more importantly than that, for business leaders, entrepreneurs, sales professionals, it's how well we understand the way that our emotions are wired so that we better know how to make good decisions to run our business, and we know where we're going to be sabotaged. We know the kinds of support that we need to grow our businesses. And it all comes down to that foundation of emotions.
So walk us through a couple of examples. Like, let's use me as the guinea pig first, because we're really going to have a number on my partner, Matthew.
Okay.
So I tend to be, and I think it's a genetic defect that I blame my ancestors for. I tend to be a little bit emotional.
No way.
So what I do, a little bit. So what I do is I never make a big decision without sleeping on it. And that kind of makes me marinate. It kind of diffuses my emotion. Next day I call it, Matt, let's do this. Let's not do this, because I've had time to contemplate. So kind of walk us through, we're all selling. If we're small business owners, we're selling all day long. How can we tap into those inner emotions to make us better salespeople?
I'm going to give you an example that I think we can all relate to. We all experienced it, although I know we're all over the COVID thing and we're like moved on from that. But do you remember in the very beginning of that, when we were all like on pins and needles, nobody knew what was happening. Everybody was a little nervous, right? So empathy for others was high across the board, at least for if you were an empathetic person naturally. You wanted to demonstrate empathy, especially with your customers or prospects, clients. However, if we also had a solution that would help people, we're not doing them any favors by leaving them in this state where they're going to sleep on it or they're afraid to make a move. So as an example, so there's two emotional intelligence attributes we can assess for. One is empathy, one is assertiveness. Now, where would you say, a scale of 1 to 10, what would other people say about you in terms of your level of empathy, Luigi?
5.
I was going to tell you not to say 5. Dude, 6. You got to pick a side.
6.
6. All right, I can work with.
I'm tough. I'm tough. Like I defer to the figure it out, guys. Just figure it out. Deal with it. So okay. Maybe a 6. But when it comes to assertiveness, I give myself a 9.5.
Okay. So that's a very typical combination for a lot of leaders that I work with. High assertiveness, lower empathy. I want to be careful with my words. Not low empathy like you don't have any, but it's lower than your assertiveness score. And it's enough of an imbalance that combination is going to show up for you everywhere. So it might, in that early stages of the pandemic, it might be like, hey, look, we're all in this. Like, I get it, but we got this solution and this is going to solve your problem. Like, let's go. Like, what are you waiting for? Right? That's high assertiveness, low empathy. Now, I had a lot of clients that also had the reverse situation where they were high empathy, low assertiveness. So, what that sounded like is, hey, oh my gosh, I just wanted to check in on you. Are you okay? Oh my God, it's so tough out there and nobody knows what's happening. And how can I help? And all of that. Like, you lean into the empathy. And even if you have the solution that's going to solve all their problems and take care of pain, somebody who's high empathy, low assertiveness isn't going to even bring that up. They're going to say, just wanted to check in, call me if I can do anything. And they hang up the phone and they feel good about what they did, but they did nothing to help their clients or to grow their own business. So, really, what you want when you look at emotional intelligence, the magic is in the balance. So, it's interesting to know how you score in one of the 15 attributes, but it's useful to know how those interact together. And that's where my specialized knowledge working with these assessment reports and certified since 2008 and working with primarily business leaders and entrepreneurs and sales professionals, I'm good at seeing those combinations and how they show up in the workplace. So if you were balanced in empathy and assertiveness, you would say some version of, look, I know it's tough out there. None of us know what's happening. First, I want to check in. How are you? How's your team? Everybody okay? Let's do this. Or if you're open to it, let's have a conversation about the one thing that we can control in a sea of everything that seems like out of our control. Does that make sense? Are you good with that? And then they say yes, and you say, great, because this service, this product, this offer that we were talking about before the world caved in, this solved the problem. And like, now you're back in sales or influence or whatever conversation you're in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, Merit, is this a bit of nature versus nurture? I mean,
Yes.
are people wired this way, and can you change them?
Yes. And that's why I love emotional intelligence so much over other tools, which are also valuable for their own application. But you're probably familiar with disc profiles, personality styles. Look, that's very much hardwired. It's very unlikely for those things to change in any dramatic way unless you're really faced with some life altering event. With emotional intelligence, it tends to grow over time, as you would expect, because we're having more experiences and we're having more learning, and we can control and be very deliberate about the kinds of learning and the kinds of coaching and who we're surrounding ourselves with. So the emotional intelligence is definitely not fixed. It's good to get a baseline where you're at right now, and then you can choose based on the role that I play and my aggressive goals for my career, for my company, for myself. These are the attributes that I would like to further develop so that they're in balance with the other strengths that I have. And that's where you really can make some amazing strides. Because once you learn something about yourself, you can't unlearn it. You now know it. And if I show you some of the very standard or unique imbalances, and we discuss how those show up in the real world, now your antenna is up and you're like, oh, there I go. High empathy, low assertiveness. Got it. Okay. Now I can make a different choice.
Now, Merit, when you're working with people and small businesses, I mean, keep in mind, any small business to scale successfully needs numbers, right? Most businesses are just a very elegant pyramid. How can you work in a group setting when within that group you have so many different personalities?
Yeah. When I'm doing emotional intelligence work, it's super important that there's a one-on-one component to it, because when I've assessed, last year I did a big project with a company, a nationwide company. They brought me on to assess 55 of their top leaders across the country. And each one of those had a one-on-one experience with me to debrief their own assessment report. From there, we looked at the trends. I built a whole report that took individual names out of it, but we looked at the trends across the entire executive group. And then I was able to do training and development from a group perspective, looking at the top 5 trends of this group and the bottom 5. And it was really fascinating experience. We sliced and diced the information in a number of ways because there were different departments amongst the leadership team. So we could then look and see, okay, based on the sales team, here's the distinctions from the sales leadership, that these are their strengths and their weaker areas. On the operation side, it was a little bit different. And so, but as a group, we looked at the trends, and that's where I was able to do training for on the trends.
Now, Merit, using your initial scoring system, have you found that certain scores tend to be an indication of more successful sales folks? Like, is 5-5 best? Is 10-1 best? Like, what's the magic formula?
Well, there are certain attributes that have been proven to be consistent among top performing leaders and sales professionals. So attributes like optimism, self-regard, self-actualization, stress tolerance, those are really important attributes for leaders, as you can imagine, right? Leaders are faced with lots of stressful situations. Part of the job of a good leader is to almost absorb that stress and only pass on what's necessary to the people who are actually in the roles where they're getting things done. If they're completely stressed out, they're not able to execute. So we have to kind of shelter them from just enough of it. And that means we have to have super high stress tolerance. You want, as an example, you want your pilots to have stress tolerance. I don't want my pilot freaking out that, there's a cloud in the way, right? Like, I would be a terrible pilot. I'd be like, oh my God, is that a bird? I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So there's certain jobs that you want certain different attributes, right? I don't want salespeople with optimism off the charts and then very low sense of reality check. Like, those guys are having meeting with their sales managers going, oh my God, the pipeline is amazing. Everything's going to come through. And they have absolutely no evidence of that. And a sales manager can't make good predictions and can't make, you can't do your projections on optimism without a good sense of reality. On the other hand, I don't want totally realistic salespeople that have no sense of optimism either, because those guys, they're not prospecting. They're like, what's the point? Like, no one's going to buy. Like, we're expensive. People are going to figure that out. Like this, like, you can't have that combination either. So you need those in balance. I would say maybe I call it anchored optimism. You want to be anchored in reality, but you want to lean a little bit towards optimism because that'll get you in motion. So yeah, there are certain patterns and numbers that I'm looking for certain types of roles.
What's your take on bedside manner? Matt and I have like this pet peeve where we want our team members to be kind and courteous and well-mannered, and you shouldn't be grunting to clients, right? So how important is that? Whether or not you're a medical professional, I mean bedside manner in a very charming interaction kind of way.
I'm a big fan of the bedside manner, Luigi. Okay, sorry. That had to be said. Bedside manner. Yes, people should be charming. Here's the thing. If you are all charm and no substance, that's going to shine through right away. I do think there's sort of this spectrum, especially in sales. We in a sales role have to be really aware of not just our own emotions, but how to assess and understand the emotions that other people are dealing with. Because nobody buys anything when their emotional state is frazzled, overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, right? Like, that's not a buying state. So if a salesperson walks in the room and they're like, hey, how you doing today? Right? That is completely off-putting. And, the salesperson thinks, well, I'm just trying to be friendly and charming. And from the prospect perspective, you are such a mismatch in terms of where their energy and emotions are. So you really want to we've heard mirroring and matching for decades. We've been training that, but I used to train that in a sense of like, just mirror and match their body language and, some words that they pick and everything will magically work out. Like, that's ridiculous. That was in the 90s we trained that. Now I've said how old I am, but
No, but those people
that doesn't
are still working at car dealerships.
right. So that, that doesn't work, but really tuning into the emotion. And so if you think about it, you want to be a little bit more sort of okay than the person that you're interacting with, but not so much more that you're being well balanced and in a good mood is going to put them off even more. You kind of want to meet them where they are and then bring them along for the ride, kind of help them through to be into a mode where they're able to focus on the matter at hand.
So Merit, where did this all stem from? How did you become the sales psychologist?
Ooh, I kind of like that. I will tell you, I had two guys that were hired by the same company around the same time. This is when I had a training center in the Chicago suburbs. People would come every week to my training classes. They would learn the next piece of the puzzle. And so I had these two guys, Stephen and Daniel. They worked for the same company, sold in the same territory, the same products at the same price point. They sat in my class literally next to each other, learning the same thing from the same trainer. And Stephen had amazing results. Like, he would come back every week and be like, "Oh my God, Merit, you won't believe this. I did what you taught me to set stronger expectations. This is what happened." It was like butter. It was amazing. And then Daniel would come back and literally nothing. It was like crickets. And it was humbling, I have to say, guys, because, before that, I was like, look at me doing my training thing. Like, this is awesome. People are getting all these results. But I realized I wasn't able to take credit for Steven's success if I also didn't take some accountability and responsibility for the fact that Daniel did not do much, like flatline. And I remember complaining with a fellow coach and trainer, and they said, there was this thing I was learning about emotional intelligence, and maybe that'll give you some idea of what the difference is between these two guys and why they're having such different results. I looked into it. I did an assessment on myself. I was blown away. And I did assessments on both of these guys. And what I realized was it was kind of like looking under the hood in the car. And then you can see the mechanics and the wiring is so different. Even though the car might look the same on the outside. In fact, these guys actually did look alike. How they were wired was night and day. And so here I was trying to layer the mechanics of selling on top of weak areas for Daniel, like, low self-regard, very low optimism. He just didn't have the foundation that Stephen had. And so when I layered good techniques on for Stephen, they were right there at the top where he needed them and he could execute. For Daniel, I had to really work on strengthening those gaps first, and then those skills would be readily accessible to him when he needed them.
Merit, I don't know, for some reason, this is not really sticking. I'm not really picking up on what this is and how this works. I think there's only one solution. We need to do a case study. We need a case study.
Okay.
Any volunteers? Matthew R. Meehan, thank you so much. Merit Kahn, we now have a live patient, Matthew Meehan. Let's do an emotional intelligence analysis.
Oh, God.
Oh man. All right. Well, it would have been helpful if I'd known that I could have given you an actual assessment before this call. And then I'd really put you to the test.
Oh, what fun is that? Come on, let's go with it.
All right. Well, first let me ask you, Matthew, is there any kind of specific scenario in your leadership or business development role that you feel is really frustrating or overwhelming, or you're just not cranking on all cylinders like you'd like to be? Give me an idea.
Just have a lot going on. Just too many things at once. Staying focused in one point at one specific time.
Okay. And what would you say that other people would say about your level of independence? Are you a guy who, you know, I make a decision, I don't need anybody else's input, or do you kind of get some consensus and then make decisions?
I think I make a decision, then get consensus, but stick with my original decision. What would
Okay.
you say, Lou? Lou, is that sound about right?
Matt does his research. Like he wets his feet before he jumps into the deep end. So he does his research. You know, Matt likes to come across as kind of very cavalier and, you know, I'm the cool guy with a black t-shirt, but he's very careful and very analytical.
Okay. Would you say that would you agree with that, Matt?
Probably not. I think I'm a little less analytical than he thinks. I'm a
Okay.
headline reader. No, just joking.
Well, I think we all do that. Would you say that, or how would you say you are in stressful situations?
It takes a lot to really stress me out.
Okay.
I mean, I'll blow up, but when I blow up, it takes a lot for me to get there. But
Okay.
I've dealt with extremely stressful situations. So whatever we do now is a walk in the park compared to what I used to do.
Okay. And what about interacting with other people? Would you say that other people would say about you that you've got, you know, you're really strong in terms of relationships with other people? They know that you've got their back. They know that they can go to you. Or would you say you'd rather be, you know, with some data or some stressful situations that only require your level of competence and leave the people stuff to someone else?
No, I think I'm more of the people. I think that's Luigi. I think I'm more of the people person.
Okay. So when you say you're going back to the frustration I asked you about in the beginning, would you say you said you're overwhelmed, there's just a lot on your plate. What do you do to try to solve that when you feel
Drink,
like that?
drink.
Like kombucha, or what are we talking here?
It's the
Tequila.
Liquid Lunch Project. Where'd you think you were going?
Oh my god, how did I miss that? Are you guys drinking right now? Because I didn't get that memo. I've got coffee in my "Who chiseled that over the door" mug. That's one
Yeah,
of my
Red Bull.
famous phrases. All right. Okay. So, but seriously, how do you deal with things?
Deal with. I just do them. That's it.
Okay, you just power
Just get it
through.
done. Yeah.
Okay. And would you say that when you power through, does that always work for you, or are there situations where you feel like, man, I usually can just power through, and for some reason that's not working right now?
No, I'll just get up. I'll take depending on what it is I'm working on. Usually, like every 45 minutes, I'll get up. I'll take a break, walk around, do something,
Okay.
and then go back and attack it.
Like, is that what you do because intellectually you know, "Oh, I need oxygen to be flowing through my brain to get my neurons firing again," or is that like what you say you do, but really you sit there and you try to power through?
No, I definitely every
You do
15 minutes I do
you do?
something. So just a little bit.
Okay, good.
I sold stocks over the phone on Wall Street, cold calling, top 1% of America, built $100 million book of business, right? Trust me, that smiling and dialing, this is pre-dialers. Smiling and dialing, every 45 minutes, you need a break.
Sure.
So
Okay,
back when I
good.
used,
So you've got
yeah,
that's a good success habit that you've built. I love that. So you have a good strategy for dealing with overwhelm. It sounds like it takes a lot for you to get to that state in the first place. So if you know, my assessment without having done the scientifically validated version is that you're very high in stress tolerance. It sounds like you're very high also in independence, and you're probably well balanced enough with interpersonal relationships. I think all of those things are really strong. What I would be most intrigued to learn about from your like a real emotional intelligence assessment, not just a conversation about what I think how you're wired. I'd be interested to know uh the your strengths in terms of self-actualization, you know, how like learning and growing, constantly developing. I would imagine that's also pretty strong for you just because you do a podcast, you're talking to lots of different people, you seem like a person who's constantly working on their craft. um so it would be interesting to figure out where the gap is that would be leading to overwhelm. And is the solution getting more done through other people, like building up that interpersonal piece, or emotional self-expression is another one I'd have my eye on for a guy like you. Just,
What do you want
you
me to
said
dance?
sometimes I blow up, right? What did I miss?
Yeah, I said, what do you want me to dance?
Sometimes you said earlier, like, it takes a lot to stress me out. And then I think you said something about like, and then I would maybe blow up or something. So for me, I hear that as I want to know a little bit about your sense of emotional self-expression. There's a distinction between how well we understand. So there's our emotional self-awareness, and then there's the emotional self-expression. And oftentimes when people are overwhelmed, it's they are bottling that up. People with high stress tolerance, which is generally a good thing for leaders, sometimes there's a correlation with that and emotional self-expression, so that people around you may not know that you're feeling overwhelmed. We as leaders have looked at that as a strength. Like, you're never going to know what I'm feeling. And like, there's a level of that we need to protect them. But then there's also, if I can't express like I need help, I need this, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, then we're not opening the door for a solution. So I don't know, it's hard to do an assessment without my tool, but
Merit, that was amazing. You are awesome.
thanks.
Do I get a prize?
You do. You do. Talk to me later. I'll give you a deal on the assessment, because I want to see if I'm right now. Now I'm intrigued.
Hey, Merit, listen, we really appreciate you being here. We want to be respectful of your time, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to reach out to you. So why don't you tell them where they can find you on the socials and on the web?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is my website, meritkahn.com. So it's MERITKAHN.com, not Wrath of Khan, not Khan, but
And Merit, before you go, you promised us before the podcast started, we had a little breakout. You had to answer one question for us. What is the forgotten first step in sales?
Oh, good. I thought you were going to ask me to tell you a joke.
What's coming afterwards?
Yeah, the forgotten first step in sales, thank you for asking me that, is really making sure that you're dealing with somebody who's got an open mind to hear your offers. So if you think about, I often make the analogy in my keynote events when I'm on stage with a big audience. I bring someone up on stage and I have them make a fist, and we relate that to your prospect's closed mind. And then I have somebody else bring up the largest dollar bill, largest denomination of cash they have in their wallet, and try to get it into that closed fist. And you can't do it. And that's basically what we're doing all day long when we're trying to jam our value, what we see as our value, into somebody's closed mind. It doesn't work. So the very first thing that you have to do if you want somebody to recognize and receive your value is to open their mind. So I have them open their fist, and then you lay the money in their hand right before I tuck it away into my own pocket. But the number one rule is that the first step to a closed deal is always an open mind.
And
I love that.
For the folks at home that are listening and not watching this, there's a pillow on the sofa behind Merit that says, "Are you open to ellipses signed Merit Kahn?" How appropriate.
Which I have all that swag for sale on the site. You too
Nice.
can remind yourself.
Yeah, we had a saying like that on Wall Street, especially like when you were dealing with a prospect. They had to be qualified. In order to be a qualified prospect, you need to be willing and able, right? If they're not willing and able, you're just wasting your time at the end of the day.
Right. And the challenge, and I used to teach that all the time, but it was so far down in the conversation, right? It was that by the time you got to qualifying, you had already set some expectations, asked them a bunch of questions about their level of pain, and then you get to qualifying, budget decision, commitment, all of that. Like, that's the qualifying step. But my perspective is, look, before we even get to any of that, we first have to say some version of, have you already decided it can't get any better? Or are you open to a new possibility? Are you open to a new possibility that this issue that we're about to talk about is no longer going to be an issue for you? Like, what can you even imagine? Or are they just resigned to problem is just how it's going to be? So I do think that really checking in on that open mind before you even get to any of those other qualifying questions has been a total game changer for my clients.
I love that. Merit, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you guys. That's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.